Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 36th Sustainable Agriculture Conference from the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association. My name is Mary Beth Miller, CFSA's Education Coordinator. You have joined the session, Ujamaa Cooperative Farmers Alliance, Seeds of Resistance and Resilience, with Amirah Mitchell, founder of Sista Seeds, and Ira Wallace from Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Put your questions in the chat and they will address them throughout this session. Please remember our community conference agreements while you engage in chat and discussion. And without further ado, I will hand it over to Ira and Amirah.
Hi. So I guess I'm going to start, and I'm going to start by sharing my screen and then talk a little bit about history and a little bit about Ujamaa. And then Amirah is going to join and talk about her experience as one of the young Black farmers on the line, learning and creating her own farm and seed company to come. So yeah, this is going to be really fun.
I'm going to go to window.
Okay, just a minute while I figure out.
And then share. There you go.
Ha! I'm successful. Ujamaa Cooperative Farmers Alliance is one of many initiatives emerging in the seed world, which is one of the whitest of the white farm areas. And so we're using Ujamaa a little bit to talk about what's going on in a whole movement. But before we can get to the future, we need to go back a little bit. And one of the things we want to remember is that African American people and Latino people, people of color all over the United States have used cooperation from the time of slavery, when there were mutual aid societies where people were working to free themselves and their families. And after the emancipation, many people of color came together to create Black towns. If you look into like Edna Davis talking about her family's town, which was called Freetown, because her grandfather and several people from the plantation where they had been enslaved created a town and made a living farming for themselves together. Another thing in our history is kind of realizing that cooperative education by extension and colleges started at not totally started, but was developed most strongly at Tuskegee Institute. And Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver really pioneered this. And the reason I mention these historical things is they're erased from what we're taught when we're thinking about what, is the landscape of farming and who created it. That's me and my daughter, those many years ago when I was young. And now I have gray hair and not so much of it. But when you think about the homesteading movement, you kind of think of it as young white hippies, but there were also people of color looking to get better nutrition, a more balanced life for themselves. And that same thing is happening again in these times. And why am I so hot about these BIPOC-led groups? It's because I've been into cooperation, but in groups that are really well-meaning, really kind, cooperative people that are Black-led, not very many people of color want to join. And so for me, supporting these BIPOC-led initiatives is a chance to see what makes a difference about why Black people and other people who are not in the majority can't so much find themselves in these cooperatives. And I'm hoping that we can make a difference in supporting them. Here's one of the farmers who has a successful co-op thing going on in working. Herbert Brown is a part of Browntown Farm, and they have heirs property, which, as many heirs properties, were kind of disputed for a while. And he brought his family over, a dozen states together to make agreements so that the younger members of the family who wanted to farm are able to once again farm the land that their grandparents and great-grandparents farmed. And here is an annual dinner at Truelove Seeds. Amirah will tell you more about that because this is a part of her story. She worked and learned as a part of that team. And I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about that story, even though I've heard some to begin with. One of the things that I wanted to put up is that in the seed landscape, one of the real problems is big multinationals taking over our seed supplies and the control of our seeds from our local communities. And we want to take it back. And don't forget Native people who the colonial culture took over from more than, I don't know, anybody in this country. And one of, my joys was being able to work with rematriating perhaps is a better word, the Cherokee Black Eagle dent corn to the Cherokee nation. This has been one of their traditional corns, and they didn't have the seed. And through a lot of cooperation, and this is something, if you're forming a co-op, is sharing between co-ops is one of the principles that we do, and it's part of why we support the Ujamaa movement. And don't forget the vegetables themselves. All of
Hey, Ira.
Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt, and I'm very sorry, but is there a way you can put your slides in presentation mode? Because I think that the audience can't see them as they're advancing.
Oh dear. Record, reverse.
Oh, start slideshow.
Where?
You see right there where it says start slideshow. Go to view.
If you go where you were with start slideshow, that you have to go back to slideshow. Okay, that'll work.
Can you see?
It's still in the editing mode. You need to go into slideshow.
Okay.
And then if you see where it said start slideshow where you were before, and there's a button that says from current slide.
Uh-huh.
And that'll take you to it.
Okay. Can you see it?
Let's try it. Let's do a test. Why don't you move?
Oh, they can't see it. I know what the issue is though. Go to stop sharing. And then go back to Chrome. And then Chrome. And then you just click right there real quick. This needs to get out of the way. Press that little button, the little arrow button, and then go to share screen.
Okay.
And then just click that.
Click share.
Right there, and now share. and then go back to your PowerPoint.
Sorry.
It's okay. And now go.
Can you see it now?
That's wonderful. Thanks so much.
Oh man, to be an old lady giving a presentation and get so embarrassed. Okay.
Not at all. Thanks so much, Ira.
Thank you for pointing it out because. Okay. Another that I put Ellen's family heirloom because this is one that is known to be from a Black family, but it was shared with a white family at a time when Black people's last names were not given out. And so Ellen grew these and her family maintained them in Conley Springs, North Carolina, but her last name is lost to us. But that doesn't mean that we can't still raise up that's a kickin' pickling tomato. I mean, cucumber. Talking a little bit about collards, talking about them as an heirloom and brings us to, varieties that are particularly important in African American communities. And this really showed its stuff because we were a part of a nationwide citizen science trials, and more than 20% of the participants were African American. And I have never been in any kind of trial that had that high of African American participants. So we know when we have varieties that matter to communities of color as a part of our agenda that people participate. And here's some of the varieties, just to, if you haven't ever seen the very genetic variety in collards, here's some curly ones and shiny ones and purple ones. It's more than you thought. And then you can see some of the not so everyday characteristics, like this early blooming one that's particularly good for people along the southeast coast of Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida, where they don't have very many chill days to get the biennial collards to make seeds. And here's Michael Twitty, and I brought him here because he brings out that if you can't get the story of food and African American people directly, you can indirectly by information that's left about what food people were growing, what they were selling, and this is a way to take the history that was hidden and unwritten and bring it into the light. I put this in because this is an Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority sister, and Elmer Kesey, who's a master gardener, who was a mentor for this group of sorority sisters who were lawyers and doctors and not farmers, to get their hands in the dirt and to grow the first crop from the heirloom seed project, that one of the first crops that were shared and put in the International Seed Vault at Svalbard. And actually probably the first African American variety that has been so honored. And there's that collard. It's called William Alexander Heading. And the reason it has that wire over it is the deers liked it so much that they had to protect it doubly in order to get a seed crop. Here is one of a seed grower that I know, and she's from the Caribbean, and she specializes in ginger and turmeric and lemongrass and things like that. Berea College, I put here, it's a student garden there, and there in this particular picture, it's me when I had lots of hair. But one of the things that I wanted to point out is Berea College has a program where if you're accepted, they will make sure that you have the financial assistance and that you need without being indebted for the rest of your life to be able to get your college education. And this college reached out in the earlier days mostly to African American students, and now in other hill country people who have limited resources, but now not so many African American families take advantage of this, opportunity to get a college education without a lot of debt, which doesn't have that much directly to do with co-ops, but it was a cooperative college in its early days. These are some of the beans that are really important in the mountain country. And here are Crowder peas, and that's a very important variety to people of the African diaspora. And here, Michael Carter Jr., who does a lot of education for small farmers, and he and his sons, who are like 4 to 14, 4 boys, run a seed company, Carter Brothers Seeds, which is another part of the cooperative effort, is to teach young people that cooperative entrepreneurial spirit. And here's an African Celosia. Michael Carter and his boys, he raised them half in Africa and half in the US, and they grow especially a lot of varieties from Africa. Here are some of the growers, and I'm hoping in working at Southern Exposure with the Ujamaa Project to meet more farmers where we can help them see if seeds work to meet the bottom line of their farms and interests. And this little white-haired boy, I put him there because his family does something that I hope more Black and brown families will do as they become seed growers, is each child starting at like 5 has a seed crop that they're responsible for, and they save money for their college fund starting at that time with it. And his older brother got into college partially based on a seed cleaning machine he had built for their family. And so, yeah. Here is Cliff up in the top right-hand corner is Cliff Slade, and he is now part of a 4th generation with his granddaughter joining him on the farm. And there's Cliff when he was little, when he was just a 2nd generation farmer. And it's not just seeds, but for example, sweet potatoes are grown from slips, and that's what Cliff's specialty is. And he also grows elephant garlic. So there are a number of things that ways that people grow that can become income streams, either to sell to a company like us or to sell in your local area, just at farmer's market, just like you would potted plants. I'm going to go through 2 or 3 slides that are a little bit about Ujamaa. And I thought about using slides that I made, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to do something different and grab some by Bonita Deeb, who's the president and founder of Steam Onward, who has been the main support for and center point for the Cooperative Garden Commission and the Ujamaa Collective Seed Farming Alliance. So, yeah, Steam Onward is different because it really is a youth motivated project. looking to get youth involved in entrepreneurship, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But the vehicle is farming. And here are some of the pictures that show the variety of farms that are involved in the Ujamaa project. And most of them are small city growers, so they're not what you think of. And that's where some of the opportunity for cooperation on rented land, and hopefully on land that will be able to buy for Ujamaa. So just like the land here at Acorn Community Farm, it's available to future generations of cooperators as well as those who are working now. Here's a few of the farmers. And the farmers that are involved with Ujamaa are all over the country. It's centered in Maryland. And that's where the work of STEAM Onward happened. But in some ways, because this initiative emerged during the pandemic, the reach of the World Wide Web has brought in Black farmers from all over the US and all over the world looking for ways that we can cooperate. And hopefully that will happen. A couple of resources if you want to think, differently about the role of Black and brown people in the farming system. Farming while Black. You don't have to want to farm. It's a great read if you just are an eater who wants to know where your food comes from and how the story sort of does not include the story of the Black and brown people who we know, if you've been around anywhere, are a big part of the workforce that give you food. But actually, not from that book, but as I've gotten into this, I've also realized that, Japanese people during the Second World War were also a part of the problems in our country for people of color. And then I mentioned to you Michael Twitty and his looking at the story of food and agriculture with Black people through the cooking lens. What can you do? Well, there are many things you can do. You can save seeds, you can have seed libraries, you can create learning opportunities. You don't have to be the teacher, you can just create the venue and invite teachers that are going to talk about seed farming. You can mentor a young farmer to be, and we see this with the STEAM Onward project as people work in school gardens or church gardens or with neighbor children and so forth. You can volunteer. You can donate money or time, whatever you want to. And you can join the Ujamaa Cooperative Farming Alliance or other cooperative initiatives that are happening in your area. And I'm going to let Amirah take over now because she is going to tell you, as a young person, how do I get out of this?
Go back to Chrome. There you go.
Okay. Did I successfully get out of the slideshow? Yay! Amirah, go girl.
All right. Thank you so much, Mama Ira. Hello, everyone. My name is Amirah Mitchell, and I am a seed farmer. I'm in the process of starting my own farm next season called Sister Seeds. And I wanted to share with you guys a little bit about my experience, what my journey has been to get here, and some of the particular challenges that I've faced along the way in regards to becoming a seed production farmer, particularly as a person of color, and some of the ways that I think that the move to cooperative economics, projects such as Ujamaa, can really benefit any of you who are thinking about doing something similar. Yeah, I started farming in 2007 when I was a teenager. And after that, very first summer job, I continued farming and working in food justice organizations. And it's always been very important to me to connect my farming work to my community work and to justice work. And for me, the moment that I decided to shift my farming practice from vegetable farming to seed production specifically was at a conference that I went to. Um, I think I was still in fresh out of high school or maybe just starting college, and I went to a conference, and Ben Burkett was there. Ben Burkett with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. And I eavesdropped my way into a conversation that he was having about some of the issues with the global seed industry and the need for particularly for Black farmers to be able to purchase seed from other Black producers and to have that networking power. And that really struck a chord with me, and I took it as a mission. And that's the moment when I decided that I wanted to shift my farming practice into seed production primarily. And as once I had made that decision, my first step was to try to figure out, well, where can I learn this? Where are there other Black farmers, farmers of color who are doing work with seeds, who I can learn from, and can tell me? And I really struggled to find a mentor at first. Eventually, I moved to Philadelphia and I started working with Truelove Seeds, which is a small farm and seed company that focuses on growing culturally important heirloom vegetable seeds. And although my mentor, Owen Taylor, is not a person of color, he really did create opportunities for me to learn about seed farming and to learn about it in a way that felt true to what I wanted to do, to learn about the seed crops that I was really interested in, and be able to work with a number of really important African American and African diasporic cultural heirlooms. So I've worked with Truelove Seeds for the past 4 seasons, and I also teach workshops and try to get other people to engage with seeds in different ways. So I've been running a seed keeping fellowship program, teaching others to grow and save seeds from their own cultural heritages. And then now I am transitioning to starting my own seed production farm. So some of the particular challenges that I faced, one of the first ones is just lack of access to information as it regards to seed production. I think there's a lot of resources out there for people getting started in vegetable farming at different scales, but when it comes to seed farming, I found that there was a lack of resources for small scale and mid scale farms. There's plenty of resources, I think, for home gardeners, and there are some resources for very, very large scale operations. But for a small farm, I really found that it was a struggle to find information, which is why in my involvement with Ujamaa now, one of my primary roles is to help educate people who are interested in starting seed farming, how to get started, what they need to know, what resources they can look to, and just give people a good grasp on some of the differences between the farm production styles and tools that they can use to get started. Another challenge that I mentioned was the lack of community for Black seed growers. And that's one that I think is really well served by Ujamaa and other organizations like it, in that was able to meet, through my involvement with Ujamaa, so many other farmers of color that were interested in doing seed work, regardless of whether they had been doing it for years already or were brand new. The opportunity to create that community and to meet others and to share to share information and create community is really, really important. And when I first got interested in, working with heirloom seeds in particular, I did notice that in most seed catalogs that focused on heirloom seeds, they really didn't focus on my heirloom seeds. They really focused on these narratives of whiteness and seeds that were from communities that I did not belong to or resonate with. And because I was interested in growing African American heirlooms specifically, I found that lack of information pretty disturbing. And as I learned more, found that much of that lack of information and that lack of access to those types of heirlooms is in part due to misattribution, where the Black stewards of seeds, farmers of color who stewarded these seeds, were simply not acknowledged, or their work was not attributed to them, or in some cases where their varieties were ignored by commercial seed production. And so the best way that I've found to identify those heirloom varieties that I'm really interested in, as has been proven through the Heirloom Colloids project that Mama Ira mentioned, the best way to identify those varieties and bring them back into production for our communities is through community connection, through forming community with our neighbors and figuring out and learning from them what varieties have been kept in their families for generations. So that community aspect is a really crucial part of the work, and one way in which cooperative economics can really serve us. And then another huge challenge, of course, for any farmer, but especially for a seed farmer, is the lack of funds and money. With seed production, there's a much longer return, a much longer time to return on your initial investment in your farm, because when you're growing something for seed, you have to wait all the way until the end of the season when the plants have finally started to produce seeds to really have a product that you can then market. And so because of that enormous time that it takes to producing something that's marketable, the funds issue was really discouraging to me at first. And I think that, this is something that many farmers of color struggle with. And it's one way that by pooling our resources, farmers of color can really support each other in this work. As Ira mentioned before, the seed industry historically is very, very white, and it's historically also very, very exploitative. But to counter that history, cooperative economics have been a tool that Black communities, and especially farming Black communities, have used successfully to gain an economic foothold to create a better living for our farms and our communities. And I think if you are considering farming, if you're considering seed production, if you are a farmer of color, I think we're in a particularly opportune moment to get involved and get started with that. There's been a real shift over the past few years that I've noticed that there are more and more seed companies and industries that are interested in investing in Black communities and Black organizations and projects. And there's been a lot more focus lately on supporting Black farmers, and I think because of that, projects like Ujamaa have really benefited from a large amount of support. And so if you are considering joining this kind of a project, I think there's a lot of momentum in this moment to do so. So that is most of what I had planned to say. And I see we still have a lot of time left, but I'd like to welcome questions from the audience. If you have anything that you'd like to ask of either of us, I will read out the questions, and then both Ira and I can answer.
Amir, I don't know if you can see the if that was a question or a comment from Savannah Bird.
I can't actually see that comment. It cuts off. I don't know how to read it.
There is one. Well, I could read this one that's right on the middle of the screen. Well, no, it keeps going away.
Well, Serena did ask. There's a photo, Ira, I think that you had up of why the tomatoes were on the floor.
Why the tomatoes were on the floor? Well, you get a higher germination rate if the tomatoes are fully ripened, and you'll know from buying green tomatoes and putting them, on the windowsill to finish ripening before you eat them. The same thing happens with the seeds inside, that they're ripening more. And in order to not have them touch, if one of them went soft and got kind of mushy, each other, the space, that room that was a rope making machine room, repurposed to be a seed drying room, and it didn't have any shelves yet. Yeah.
Okay. I do see. Oh, Mary, are you talking? I can't hear you.
I had never considered the seeds themselves needing to ripen. That's a completely new concept to me. So.
Yeah, well, it's not just tomatoes. Squash and cucumbers are like that. When they look like what we normally think of as ripe and let them sit for a month or two, you definitely get much higher germination, better quality seeds and storage. that is the stuff that when Amirah talks about looking for mentors, it really is important. And it's, one of the things that I hope as an elder in the seed community, I've written a lot, but a lot of people of color that I meet who are young appreciate getting a little bit of FaceTime and in-person teaching, and then the written material is more useful.
I see a couple additional questions in the chat now. A question from Angie says, what can folks do to support you if they are not BIPOC and or seed farmers?
Well, you said, do you want to answer that some, or should I answer what would you prefer, Amirah?
Take it away, and I'll just chime in if I need to.
Okay. Well, there are a number of things that you can do if you're not BIPOC. You can be proactive in your white organizations in making space to take on teaching and leadership roles, so that their faces and their voices are heard. You can vote with dollars. When a seed company is new, like say at Southern Exposure, when we first took it over, it was 3 years before we were able to pay ourselves anything. We were just building the company with every dollar we had. So every pack of seed was helping that farmer to survive. If you're a farmer and a Black farmer who saves seeds that you really like, buying in bulk directly from them is really important. And the other is each one teach one. If you learn something here that you didn't know before about the role of Black farmers in the seed industry and the emerging changes, share it with your friends, because white people can tell white people stuff that a Black person can't as effectively tell them.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Go ahead and support financially if you're able, and support Black-owned seed companies and cooperatives if you're able. And additionally, I would say that there's many young BIPOC folks out there that feel very isolated in their communities and maybe you're the only person of color out there. And if you know them, please connect them to, to us or any other potential mentors that they might find who look like them, because it's very, very important for that community to be built. Another question I see here is, what are some of your favorite collard varieties that you would recommend growers working with? And what crops would you recommend beginning seed savers start with? Which is a great question.
Do you want to? You can answer first on this.
Sure. Well, my favorite collard variety is actually one that you introduced me to. It's the green glaze collard that you told me about, and I started growing it, and now I grow it for seed, and I just adore it. It just cooks up so beautifully. And then as for crops that I recommend beginners seed savers start with, well, I worked with a number of first-time seed savers this past season. Wow, that was a lot of alliteration. And we talked through when they first started what they wanted to grow, and then I gave them some advice about what might be feasible and easiest for them to get started with. So one of the easiest things for any new seed keeper, I think, is any kind of a legume. If you have a favorite bean or black-eyed pea or something like that, those are pretty easy because they don't require a lot of isolation distance, and they're also quite easy to pick. You just pick them when they're brown and crispy, and very easy to clean. So there's not a lot of a learning curve involved there. Some other good crops to begin with would just be start with something that you're already familiar with, that you already know that you can grow well. And I think, when you're starting something new that you've never kept for seed before, it can be a little bit challenging to know, when things are going wrong. But if you start with something you already know you can grow, you're going to be off to a really good start. And just when in doubt, just make it the only variety of that particular crop that you grow. Let's see. Do you have any seed crops you recommend to beginners?
Yeah, you said it. I think of beans. The other thing is tomatoes, which also doesn't need a big isolation distance. And you can tell when they're ready, because when they're at the peak of deliciousness, it also, they have mature seeds inside. And people who want to grow a lot of different things for seeds, because they are really largely pollinated, you get a lot of seeds in each tomato, generally speaking. You can take a branch and cover it with floating row cover or something like that, just long enough for the seeds to set, and then take the cover off, take that branch and put like a piece of red yarn or flagging tape or something on it, and then you can save. This is how people have 60 different tomatoes they save from. So, yeah, I like that.
Lauren,
collards are good. Don't forget collards. Even though they're biennial, there's something that you can start in late summer or fall. Get a crop off of, because they need to be like 3 or 4 feet apart when you're saving seeds, but they only need to be a foot apart when you're growing collards for eating. So you can double dip. And I always am in favor of things where you can double dip.
Lauren asked me if my GoFundMe is still active. Thank you for asking that question, because it is. I don't know if I could put a link in the chat or something if you are interested in supporting me. I'm still raising funds to start my farm next year. I'll try to put a link in if I can. Delphine asked, how do we order seeds so that we can start growing heritage vegetables and eventually save seeds? Do you have a catalog? All right. Yes, I'll do
that. Great.
Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. You can get things through our catalog, and one of the things we're going to do this year that I'm to help Ujamaa get started is have a couple of special things, which hopefully will go on our website in the next 2 weeks, where half of the proceeds, we'll buy the seeds from Ujamaa growers and then give half of the proceeds of the sale directly back to the Ujamaa project, so that we can hopefully encourage both of those activities. Yeah, and we will try to, as we did last winter, have a list of these small emerging companies on the Southern Exposure website so you can find them.
Yeah, and I think if you follow the progress of Ujamaa in the future, very soon there will be a seed catalog where you can purchase seeds. Not just yet, though.
So true. Yeah, in January. Don't give up because it doesn't happen right away. It is coming.
Okay. Any more questions?
A while ago, some reasons why BIPOC folks have not joined in the past, and I can say in our co-op is the thing, because we share. You don't own individually the land. We share it collectively, and it's for people who want to land in this cooperative way. And many people feel like, okay, if I go on my own, I'll be able to have my own farm, and that might be a good choice. But for many people, it's actually making the choice not to live there at all. And this is why I particularly support these BIPOC efforts to see if there are different ways of being very cooperative that would be more appealing to BIPOC farmers. And I'm thinking, models where people own land next to each other, or maybe own the land collectively, but where each farm has their own plot that they're working, so that they can share equipment and things, because that stuff is what kills you, is all the stuff.
Additionally, I think there's a little bit of a circular problem there, because I know just personally the idea of moving to, I am from an urban area, and the idea of moving to a rural area in a co-op filled with mostly not people of color, that's a pretty intimidating transition. And I think it does make a difference when the cooperative originates with the intention of being Black led, that it feels safer if you don't know anything about the people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's certainly some of those initiatives happening. There's in our county a group called Serenity Community for Peace and Justice here in Louisa County, and we have a house that on a piece of land that Southern Exposure has, that we have given over to that group, because it's only an acre, so it's not big enough really to have a farm, but to live in while they build up enough funds and are able to have their own land. And they'll be close enough that we can help with sharing equipment and things like that. So it's going to be a row to hoe, but we're all getting ready to put out our hoes and work hard, right? Yeah, we are.
All right.
We can't
hear you again, Mary.
Beth.
I always mute because there's sometimes a screaming baby in the background. And so I'm just being careful, but I'm being too careful. If anyone has any last questions for Amirah and Ira, please put them in the chat. Or Ira and Amirah, if you have any parting thoughts before we wrap up. I really appreciate your time. And Ira, I'm sorry, I can't see you in person this year, but I'm really excited that you'll be able to be part of the seed intensive at Franny's Farm next Monday. I know people are really excited about that. So thank you so much for your time. And we look forward to hearing more about Sister Seeds and where that goes. Amirah, thank you so much.
Thank you.